Well, hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Celeste Harrison, and I'm so happy to have you joining us here on Explorer Classroom. At National Geographic, we believe in the power of exploration and wonder and storytelling to change our world for the better. This Explorer Classroom YouTube show connects students from all around the world with our National Geographic explorers for short lessons and plenty of time for all of your students' questions. Today, our featured explorer is Isla Keesje Davidson. She's a biologist who studies how changes in the ocean impact communication between marine species, including how fish that live in and around coral reefs use acoustic communication. She's traveled to all kinds of different marine habitats around the world, including French Polynesia and Australia and many more, to research how animals like manta rays and clownfish tell each other different kinds of information. And Isla loves to communicate what she finds out to the rest of the world. She uses photography and videography and poetry and all sorts of stuff to share her learning. Today, we'll be talking about marine ecosystems and the systems that help animals make sense of their world and underwater science and so much more. But Isla's main hope is to help people like you understand, appreciate, and protect the ocean by sharing the amazing stories of life under the water and building friendship with countries and people up above the water. So before we get into today's lesson, which sounds amazing, I want to welcome all of our friends joining us from around the world. We've got a ton of classes registered from places all across the US and Canada and all around the globe. Our shout outs for the morning go to Miss Hardin's upper elementary class, Lauren Park Public School, Moorhead Montessori, Easton Park, Adam, Cedar Lane, TDSB, Tecumseh Public School, Pleasant Valley Elementary, Mountain View, Jonestown, Thurgood Marshall, Nice Circle, St. Peter and Paul, Our Lady of Lourdes, Hanson, Ryan Global School, MK Lewis, 4th grade at PS 54, WH Morden, Plumtree Park, Regency Acres, Kilmer Middle, Freedom, Romath, PS 151, St. Anne, Samuel Hearn Middle School, Camelot, Discovery, Howard, Kashmir Pulaski, Macias's class, Reagan Elementary, St. Teresa's, Enos Garcia's, West Philadelphia Achievement, Oida Springer, Ottawa, Chaparral Elementary, Belize School, Daysville Junior Public School, Miss Vidal's class, Sunnyview, St. Cecilia, St. Aidan, Centennial Central, McGill, South Crosby, St. Bernard, St. Anthony's, and Horace Mann School. I'm thrilled to have you here. If I missed your group in the shout outs, please let us know in the chat bar. We would love to say hi there. But with all of that talking out of the way, it's finally time to turn it over to Isla. Let's get this Explorer Classroom started. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And also thanks to everyone who's made it possible for us to have this session. It's pretty cool. I am going to attempt to share my screen. Please be forgiving if this takes more than 2 seconds. Let's go for it. Okay. Here we go. Hopefully I will appear in the corner of the screen. Okay, great. So, as Celeste said, I am a marine biologist. And so what I focus on is trying to learn about those underwater animals and how they navigate their space and their world. So how are they communicating? How are they using their senses to do that? And one thing that ties all of these different creatures together, even the turtle that's hiding behind my head, is they all depend on the ocean space, and that is their natural habitat. And if we think about it, that is very different from our natural habitat. So if you guys are willing, let's just give it a go. Everyone just imagine the ocean and then just hop straight into it. Jump, dive, don't get anything else, just go straight in. And imagine that as the water splashes across your face, it's going to splash into your eyes and on your cheeks, and it's going to trigger the mammalian dive reflex. And what that's going to do is it's going to kick that instinct in to make you hold your breath. And as the water slowly trickles into your ears, it's going to change the way that your eardrums can pick up the vibrations from sound. So if you're underwater, you can't really hear things very well. And as that water splashes against your eyes, let's just say you've kept your eyes open, The refraction of light means that your eyes aren't going to be able to detect things in the same way. So actually, when you're looking underwater, everything's blurry. And you guys might experience that from having swum in a pool or even the ocean itself. So all of that is to show that your senses aren't particularly useful as a human underwater, because we can guarantee that hopefully you're not breathing, right? So no water's going in your nose or through your mouth, which means you definitely can't smell and you probably can't taste anything. And so we're not, as humans, particularly useful. And that is why whenever I go out, I use my trusty mask and snorkel. And I was going to put it on, but I realized I have headphones on, so that's going to be a challenge. But basically, this just means that I can see things underwater, because otherwise I'm pretty useless as a researcher. But what I thought we could try and do is rely on our human senses to just have a go at something. So I'd like you all to close your eyes and just focus on what you can hear around you for a couple of seconds, okay? So close your eyes and see what your sense of sound is picking up. So maybe you heard some wind blowing outside, and that's going to indicate, what the weather conditions are like outside. Or maybe you heard a classmate shuffle in their seat or a dog run past. That's going to indicate who your neighbors are, who's close to you. And all of these things that we can pick up through this sense of sound are clues to what our environment is like and what it's actually telling us about our environment. And fish do the exact same thing. So they use all of this sound that they can hear to detect what's going on in their environment and what that means for their lives. Only fish have had 400 million years to evolve separately from us to know how to use the ocean environment much, much better than we as humans can. And so they can really pick up sounds in a really sophisticated way, which I personally think is really, really cool. So let's swim away into the coral reefs, and they are busy, noisy places. And that is because a quarter of all fish species that we know even to exist on this planet all either live on or depend on coral reefs. So you've got so much going on in this space. And so there's a whole lot of sounds that you can pick up as well. So I don't know how many of you might have heard what a coral reef sounds like, but one of my favorite concoctions of a busy place is the coral reef soundscape. So hopefully you'll be able to hear this. Give it a second. It's just loading, but this is the coral reef. So what you can hear there are pops, grunts, snaps, crunches. It's fish eating, it's fish pooping, it's fish chirping to one another, it's shrimp, it's crabs, it's all sort of critters. Try and see if you can pick out individual sounds in that oceanscape. So there's a lot going on there in the soundscape of the coral reef. And there are lots of different reasons why these animals are communicating for each other. It might be to defend their territory. It might be to find food. It might be to help each other out in different contexts. But sound underwater is so important for a whole host of different reasons. For one example, if you see all the little fish around me, these are tiny juvenile fish, right? They've just come from the whole open ocean. And they find the coral reef from the sound of the coral reef. That's how they find their way home. So it's a really important sense underwater for these fish to be able to detect, and then the new generation of coral reef fish to actually be able to make it onto the coral reef. But for us trying to study it, it's pretty hard listening to all of those different sounds and to know what's going on. So what we like to do is we like to try and focus in on a particular species or even an individual. So here right now, we're in the Great Barrier Reef. These photos are the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And we're trying to zoom in and focus in on that little yellow fish. So I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to see if you can spot in that busy coral reef a tiny little yellow fish. If you can't see him, I'm going to give you a round 2 of a chance. The hint is that it's not the big obvious fish in the front of the photo. Try and pick the little yellow fish in the background. That little yellow fish is called an Ambon Damselfish. And they are such noisy fish, let me tell you. They are also a big fan of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. So for all we know, maybe they have an Australian accent, but they are very, very noisy. So what I'd like you guys to try and do is just imagine what you think the sound is that fish, that Ambon Damselfish makes. And for you guys in the class, maybe this will be fun, or if you just feel like it, go for it. I'm going to count to 3 and then just make the sound that you think this fish makes, okay? So 1, 2, 3. Nice, I can see you guys giving it a go, that's great. Right, this is the recording that I made of an Ambon Damselfish. Here we go. Ready? There we go. So I'd be really impressed if any of you guys got that right. It was definitely not what I was expecting the fish to make. And we recorded that the Ambon Damselfish made this sound when it was defending its nest. So in the photo that you might be able to see up there on the top, there's an adult Ambon Damselfish and he's defending his eggs. So the little cloud of gray behind him, that's hundreds and hundreds of eggs. So he's defending his nest. And in the little blue photo at the bottom is a baby Ambon Damselfish. And you can tell because it's got a little black spot on its dorsal fin. And so they might be saying in that moment, you know, this is my territory, this is my nest, back off, I am feisty and I will defend it with all I've got. And watching the fish at the same time as recording the sounds is a really good way of learning why they're making these different acoustic signals. So another one, a classic, can't go to a coral reef without looking at the clownfish. Only this time we're not finding Nemo, we're hearing Nemo. So let's do it again. I'd like to hear if you guys have good clownfish sounds. I'm going to count to 3 and then best clownfish sound. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Great, really good. Thanks for giving it your best shot. Ready? This is what a clownfish sounds like. So you can hear little clicks rather than a sort of whooping sound that the Ambon Damselfish made. And we recorded that the clownfish were making this sound when they were actually about to be attacked by a predator. So you can see in the photo there, that is a peacock grouper, and they're an ambush predator. So they swim along very quietly, camouflage, and then once they get a shot, they just go for you. And we recorded that the clownfish make these sounds just before they think something dangerous might happen. So maybe they're warning the little ones to stay hidden in the anemone where they'll be protected. And if you think about it, if you're making a sound like that, that literally is the difference between life and death. You know, if you don't listen to that acoustic signal, you could just be dinner, boom, done. So it's really important for these fish to listen and to understand the sounds that are happening around them. So these communication pathways are really important. But how do they make these sounds? So you might be able to see here these tiny little teeth in the clownfish's mouth. So they'll have teeth in the back of their jaw, and what they'll do is they'll just tap the teeth together really fast, and that's a really good way of making sound. But another way that fish produce sound, and this is kind of my favorite, so this big batfish here, just like other coral reef fish, they have what is called a swim bladder. And that's very much like a lung that we humans have, only when they fill it with air, it's not to breathe. They fill it with air to float up in the water column. And then when they let the air out, they go down. And it's like a ballast in a ship, you know, it's keeping them steady in position in the water column so they can swim around. But what I love is that they can also vibrate that swim bladder like a drum inside themselves. So coral reef fish are all drummers at heart. They can literally drum inside their own bodies to communicate, and they can change the way they vibrate. So maybe they just want to say, hey, there's some cool food just over there, you want to come with me? Or they can make it a little bit more urgent and speed it up and warn you from far away that there's something really big and dangerous happening. So these are some of the really cool ways in which these fish can communicate. And they're really, really sensitive to how these different acoustic cues can be sent from one another. And that's because sound travels 5 times faster underwater than it does in air. So if it can travel 5 times faster, it can also travel a lot further. So if you make an acoustic signal, it's a really reliable signal. It's going to go really far and really fast. And these fish can hear in lots of different ways as well. They've got ears, just like we do, only they're called otoliths. But they also can literally feel sound. So if you just think of how you can feel on your fingertips, you can feel your arm, you can feel your head. And if you just try this out, this is probably the closest we can get to feeling it. If you put your fingers on your neck and then you hum, can you feel that vibration? That sense of a vibration, a fish can feel that, only they can feel it across their whole body. And they don't have to be touching it to feel it. They can feel it from across the reef. So they can feel these vibrations from the fish nearby them. And it's so sensitive that they can even feel each other's heartbeats. So if you think of these shoals of fish behind me, they can feel each other's heartbeats as they're swimming along. So these are just some of the examples of how fish use sound to communicate with one another, to survive and thrive on the ocean. But what I think is really cool is sound is literally just one of the senses they have, right? We use sound amongst other senses too. They can see. There are some coral reef fish that can literally see in UV. So they signal to each other in colors that the predators can't see. It's like secret codes. You've got little baby fish that learn the smell of a predator, and so they know how to avoid that predator just from the smell of it. And you've even got fish that have electroreception, so they can detect electric fields and they can use that to navigate underwater. So they've got all of these different senses to navigate where they are underwater, to communicate with each other. And this is so important to understand, because the more we can understand about how they're using these senses, the more we can figure out why it's important for them and what they use it for. So we like to think of, what do they smell? What do they see, feel, hear? How are they using that? And to do that, as scientists, we sit there with cameras strapped to our heads or microphones that we go down underwater, diving gear, or when we're tired, we climb a coconut tree as a break. And we're doing this to try and pick up on all of the different ways in which these animals are behaving and sensing their environment. And the more that we can understand how they do this, the more we can also see how that all puzzle pieces together in terms of their life as a group. And if the ocean starts changing and there are things happening to the coral reefs, what does that mean for how they communicate to one another? Does that change how they can communicate? And what are the consequences of that? So that's some of the things that we're trying to understand and learn as we go about translating some of the pops and squeaks and drums and grunts that we hear in the coral reef. So thanks so much for listening to me nabber on to you guys. But yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant. Well, Isla, we always end with the same question here in Explorer Classroom. Do you have any general advice for the young explorers out there watching you today?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I enjoy the most that comes from this, and I think if you're curious and you want to kind of delve into this more, I would say you don't have to be near a coral reef, you don't even have to be near fish, but just other animals that you see. Just take a moment, slow down and watch it. You know, what is it doing? What sounds is it making? Why might it be doing that? And what's its context? You know, forget that you're a human for a second and just watch it and think of, what is that animal's perspective? Why is this dog wagging its tail? Maybe because it's happy. It's trying to signal to the others in its pack that it's happy to be there, that it likes them. Why? how would it feel for that bird to have the wind buffeting through its feathers? Is it puffing up because it's nice and warm, or it's trying to look tough because the cat's right next door? Just having a look and trying to think of it from this other animal's perspective through their senses. I just think it's kind of fun, and it definitely develops a curiosity and a capacity to understand them better.
Amazing. Well, Isla, thank you for doing this fascinating work. Thank you for taking the time to hang out with us and share it. I guess my other thank yous have to go to the students for these fabulous questions and the teachers for getting them to cool experiences like these. You can check out Explorer Classroom and many more free educational resources at natgeoed.org. I hope to see you at some of our upcoming Explorer Classroom events. Next week, we'll be right back here, same time, same place on Thursday, connecting with our friends aboard the Ocean Explorer, which is an exploration vessel out at sea. You can register your class or family for a shout out and a chance to be featured up here on screen at natgeoed.org/explorerclassroom. Students, I bet summer break is really on your mind. It's on our minds too. It is almost here. Our final Explorer Classroom events for this school year will be on June 10th. So teachers, go ahead and mark that down. But don't worry, we will be back with more Explorer Classroom in the fall once we're all back to school here in the US together. Be sure to keep an eye out for that fall schedule at natgeo.org/explorerclassroom, the same place where you'll find our registration information. Happy Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Have a fabulous day. Stay curious. Keep exploring. We'll see you back here soon.